Here we go. Hi, hello, welcome back to our SEL and EDU family. We're so glad that you are with us once again. We are excited to welcome Gemma Cass, who is a lecturer in primary education at St. Mary's University in London, England. She became a lecturer supporting trainee teachers after various leadership roles in primary schools. She's passionate about early childhood education, social and emotional learning, and international education. Gemma, so glad you are here. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm so pleased to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
For those of you who are just tuning in, right before we got on, Gemma asked if she could have sips of her tea, and I had to laugh. I have my unsweetened iced tea with me, but it made me think like you're across the pond, the big pond.
Absolutely. Can't be without our cup of tea, I have to say.
I love it. Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's remarkable here. Yesterday was like daylight savings time. So I think I'm still trying to catch up for that hour I'm missing in my life. And I don't not everyone observes it, but I'm trying to find that hour. I need that right now.
I am so with you on that. And Gemma, do you where you're located honor daylight savings time?
Yeah, so we do. But I think the joke is when you have children, you never get that extra hour when it's the other way around. And when you lose it, I mean, it doesn't make much difference. You're exhausted all the time anyway, aren't you? So
Mhm.
So true, so true. Um,
Yeah.
so before, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump into it because I love that you put in your bio the things you're already passionate about, and we knew this, and we know this also because, and we might be seeing a trend here that Gemma is one of the emerging leaders from the class of 2021. And before we got on, we were talking about online conferences and how Gemma presented a session at the Washington State ASCD conference. And I knew she had presented, and I knew it was around social emotional learning. But Gemma, you grabbed my attention when you told me what your topic was and the research that led you to that. Could you share that with our listening audience and our viewers as well? Because we will be posting this on YouTube.
yeah. So when I changed from being a school teacher and began working in the university, we needed to do a little bit of research to sort of show our understanding of learning in that kind of context. And one of the things I decided to look at was identity in terms of my own moving from being a classroom teacher to working in university. So I started doing some research, thinking about, who am I? Who am I if I'm not a classroom teacher? And how do I let go of that identity? And should I let go of that identity? And so that was one of the things I was looking at. And how do I form this new identity in this new role whilst joining a new team during a pandemic where I was meeting everyone online? So one of the things that really sort of got me thinking was, how do I show who I am? How do I demonstrate my ability? How do I make that good impression, if you like, whilst also having that feeling of confidence in a role that felt a little bit surreal? So that's what got me started on that. And through my research, what I noticed was there was an awful lot of I suppose when you're meeting on Zoom, it was less of that introduction that you would get to people if you joined a new school or a new company or something like that, not in a pandemic, if you met people face to face. So it was an awful lot of just getting straight onto the agenda, straight onto business. And although people would smile and say hello at the beginning, there wasn't much of that small talk. And actually, a lot of the research is saying that small talk is so important for connection. It's so important to feel part of a team. And, that wasn't really happening. So I was really interested in that. And then I suppose from that, it's looking at, so who am I within my team? How do I fit in? How do I build relationships in this strange situation? And then taking that further and thinking about working with teams as a whole. How do we join a team? How do we effectively work together? Predominantly to support the children. That's our goal. But how do we do that effectively if we actually don't really know who we are? So I guess it was really interesting, and it could take me down lots of different avenues, and I hope to still continue going down a lot of those avenues. I haven't quite finished yet. But yeah, that's kind of what got me there. And so my presentation the other week was, how do we support our students by supporting each other? That's the long story there.
Wow.
This reminds me a lot of what Craig talked about in cultivating joy and really creating those connections among staff way back in episode 1, Craig, if you remember.
Yeah.
Gemma, I'd love to know personally, what did you uncover about yourself? And then what would you recommend that people do when they're having meetings, whether it's in Zoom or face-to-face, or maybe how does that translate into classroom? So I know I just kind of threw 3 different questions out. Feel free to pick up any of them that you'd like.
So what I did was I looked at it, I sort of organized things into sort of self-image, sort of thinking about how I felt I was perceived, the ideal self, how I wanted to be perceived, and then my self-esteem, how I felt I was doing. So that was how I sort of organized my thinking, because it was, it's huge. And as I said, you could go down lots of different avenues with it. So it was really thinking about that idea of self and figuring out on a scale, if you like, how confident I was with each of those. And then it was bringing in other aspects as well, things like culture, like the culture of the university, but also the culture of the different teams I was in. How did that then affect my self-image or my self-esteem? It was looking at, what else did I look at? I'm just trying to think. I've gone blank.
Come back to it as you're thinking of it.
If I'm able to add on, Gemma, Castle, which is a pretty formidable, organization that focuses on social emotional learning. They have a guide, a toolkit, if I'm not mistaken, that talks about belonging, emotional safety, and they talk about identity, affirming student identities as well. And this kind of connects to like Steele and Darlene Hammond, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the things that I know that I've used and also have seen that have been incredibly helpful. We think about identity work is whether or not students do like autobiographies or I am statements, or there's a course that I did with Darnell Fine, and they were talking about critical race theory, and you had to talk about what you're from and talk about the background, so people could have an opportunity to get a small glimpse of some of the things you're willing to share about your upbringing, like who parented you, what does culture mean to you, those traditions, those things you hold on to, gender expression and gender orientation, if you're a little further along in your development, and how continuing to have those conversations, creating opportunities where students are able to share a little bit more about themselves or where they are or feel that they are, is also part of a much richer classroom community, long as the teachers have created the psychologically safe norms of community building that will make all of this very fruitful.
Yeah. And I suppose that makes me think as well, actually, within doing this, and where I'd like to take this is sort of thinking about, teachers who might go on to work in universities, or perhaps it's not just even about changing that, moving from one sort of educational sector to another. Maybe it's just about joining new teams in general. But, I'm talking about that and suggesting ideas as, as a white woman. I can't there suggest that I know all the answers from all the different experiences that people are having. And I think it's really important to try and get other voices on this because, we will have very different opinions and different experiences. And I think it's really important to have those. And interestingly that you talk about belonging, actually the two that I was forgetting there when I mentioned culture, there was trust and communication were the other three areas that I was really focusing on. And within that trust, it's that sense of belonging. And how do you build that trust when your communication is through a screen?
Yeah.
And what I had sort of mentioned to Krista before was it's really interesting. So you spend a year or however long building a relationship over a screen. It always feels a little bit, I don't want to say insincere, but it never feels fully valid, does it? Because,
Right.
I remember meeting people for the first time and thinking, wow, you're taller than I expected you to be, or, because I've just seen you sitting down. But then what about when people actually start working with you face to face and you've missed that opportunity to bond because actually we know you, we've been working with you for a year on the screen, but I don't know you as a colleague. We haven't really built that trust. I know you're going to turn up on time because you've done that. You've attended our Zoom meetings, but how strong are you? How can I give you this responsibility? How do I know you're going to actually make a difference for these children or these students or whoever it is? So it's a whole minefield of things that I want to explore. But yeah, I feel really strongly about teams being able to support each other. And I don't think that happens without you fully recognizing who you are and what you can bring to that team. And also being confident in that. So then you're not threatened by what other people can bring to a team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons I got so excited about what you're talking about is that, Craig, you mentioned CASTLE, and there are those 5 SEL competencies, and the first 2 are intrapersonal, your self-awareness and self-management. And I really believe until you are very firm and have a good understanding of who you are and your values and your strengths and what you bring to the table, it's going to impact your ability to create those deep, meaningful, authentic relationships. And thinking about when we define that word culture, and I have to go back and I'm not thinking of the researcher, but they talked about 3 different levels of culture, types of culture. And so, Craig, you're talking about we have that social culture, like who are we, our race, our ethnicity, our race, our gender, our sexuality, our physical abilities, all of that. But then we have an occupational culture and we have organizational culture. And how do all 3 of those come together? And that's the beauty of it, Gemma, that you just said, in that how do we gain confidence so that we know where we're at, but still open to taking in other people's perspectives. And in a classroom, we want what I call a connected community of learners in every classroom, but we need that for the staff as well. Because as adults, our need to belong and to feel that we belong and to want to trust in other people is still there. That doesn't just go away when you're grown.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And I think, every time you sort of take on a new challenge and you try something new, it's like you are starting right back at the beginning again and trying to figure it all out. And I don't think it matters how old you are and how successful you might have been in a previous role or, the sway you might have had. You go somewhere new, and it's even if you come in as a leader, like the top leader in a new place, you need to earn that trust from the people who are working for you. You need to show that you're willing to listen as well and to learn. And I think, you're right. It's ever changing and really important. I think it's a really important thing for us all to think about.
Yeah. This makes me think about Dr. Brene Brown, and Krista and I have talked a lot about that. As a leader, we are not, I appreciate what you shared about, like, leaders have to earn the respect, regard, and trust of those who serve with them. And when I think about Dr. Brene Brown, like Krista and I have talked about braving as one of those elements that are very important. And Braving, for those who don't know, Braving the Wilderness is a book by Dr. Brown, uh, and talks about boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, integrity, non-judgment, generosity. I think one of the things that I know has been very tough for me when we think about engaging, building relationships virtually is is where are there really spaces in our virtual interactions for me to feel like I want to entrust something with you or others that otherwise would be kind of in that vault, right? How do I create an authentic enough experience for people to want to share something that might be, very personal to me? And so I'm kind of curious in your experience in developing teachers, developing leaders, and just the work that you're doing. What have you learned over the course of the last year or so in this work about developing trusting relationships with people, whether or not it's virtually or whether or not it's more of a hybrid of you started out, on a Zoom screen and then found yourself now working side by side in a space?
I think it's connection. I think
Mm.
that's the key thing. It's about finding that connection. And it doesn't have to mean connection as in you've got lots and lots of things in common. I mean, yes, that's lovely. But I think it can also be in terms of having the same philosophies about things, having the same work ethic, having the same understanding of things that might be challenging, being that support perhaps when, we have that pinch point and we're all feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But I think the true value is having time beyond what's on the agenda. I think that's really key. And, I talk about that in terms of when I'm meeting with colleagues, and I certainly have become actually very good friends and feel very supported, and that sense of belonging within my my sort of immediate team that's really there. And I have to say that happened because we were able to sort of meet up earlier than I was able to meet the other people. So it has made a difference. That connection has formed. But in terms of working with the students, because of course it was all online teaching as well, it was trying to have those emotional check-ins at the beginning. How are you? How do we build a relationship as a teacher student, recognizing that I'm there to support you, I want to help you learn, I'm really passionate about you becoming the best kind of teacher you can possibly be, when you're just seeing me talk to you through a screen and we haven't got that interaction. And so how can I try and build in connection with my students at the beginning of my lectures when it's been online? And I can't say I've cracked it. I can't say I always feel like it's perfect. I would always like to improve on that, but it's certainly something that I'm mindful, and I try to, when we have breakout rooms, I try to get to every room at some point, and not just to ask them about the question that they've been given, but how are you? Are you okay? How are you finding this? I know it's quite overwhelming being on a screen all the time. So yeah, I'm going to say connection, and trying to figure out ways that you can connect even when on a screen, but then also remembering that when you meet in person, it's weird, it's different, it's not, things don't run smoothly. I remember when I started going into the university and meeting people who I'd been speaking to for months on the screen and talking to them and thinking, I don't know if they actually know who I am. I'm also wearing a mask, so I don't know if they recognize who I am. So I kept going, oh, hi, I'm Gemma. And they're like, we know. And it was just really those awkward moments of, yeah. So it's such a strange time, but it's given me a really great opportunity to learn a lot. And also within doing that research and all of this, it's given me the opportunity to think about how am I treating other people? How am I communicating with other people? How am I making sure that I am connecting in the best way that I possibly can at this moment? Because that's really important. It's important to me. It's important for that trust. It's important for that effective relationship, I think.
One of the things, Craig, that you brought up about Brene Brown is when she talks about trust, she talks about it's not just one big thing. Sorry, I hit my iced tea. It's not one big thing that creates trust, but it's a whole lot of little things. And she calls it her marble jar that adds up. And so a friend of mine, and this might have been from Brene Brown, but a friend of mine says it's like a bid for trust, where somebody will put something out there for you to see how you respond to that. And if they're finding a sense of trust, they'll keep increasing that. And Gemma, I think going back to where you were saying that with the mask, you were introducing who you were. And some people were like, oh, we know that. But for me, because names don't always stick very clearly in my head, and I have a hard time with context sometimes. Like if somebody is sitting in the same seat in the same time, I know their name. But if I see them out at the store, I'm like, I know you, and I'm trying to make sense of things. So you reaching out and just putting it out there, hi, I'm Gemma, eases that sense of anxiety that might be there for people in thinking like, oh, I know this person. Who are they? I'm seeing them in a different context. And so thinking meaningfully about how you're opening up dialogue and extending that to put the other person at ease is part of that communication, I think. And if I could add in, I want to ask you, one of the other things that you brought up is having those conversations around what we need as individuals in order to be a successful part of a team. We were actually talking about that before we got on air. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what that dialogue might look like as an intentional relationship building activity.
So actually, this is something that I talked about within that presentation a few weeks ago as well. It's how do you, as you say, how do you start to build that trust, those relationships with new people? And I think it is about having time for those conversations about this is what's important to me. This is my philosophy. This is how I work. I'm really great when things are well organized. I find it quite stressful when they're not, or, whatever it is that works for you and what doesn't. And I think it's not being afraid to not only talk about your strengths, but also say, actually, in order for me to work well, this is what's important, because then it means that the people that you're working with, they know what they're aiming for. They can try, even if they have a very different work style, they can certainly try and think, okay, I know that if I'm going to give Gemma information, she needs to have at least 24 hours to look through that. She has a family, whatever it is. She's made this clear and shared this, so I can try and make sure that I, honor that, because ultimately we're all working towards the same goal. Likewise, if they're saying to me, actually it doesn't work if you're emailing me after this time or whatever, it's just, I think it's honoring what people are saying they find challenging and also what works for them. But I think it's also, if you know what your non-negotiables are, if you like, what you're really passionate about, what you're going to bring to that team, along with all the other admin side of things, I think that can be really helpful, because actually as a team you think, wow, that person has always got these fantastic ideas, or they're always so supportive. It doesn't matter if we're having a difficult day or we feel like we've sort of hit a bit of a bump in the road, they're going to be supportive and help us to find a solution to move on. And I think, recognizing that in yourself is really important. And then, maybe supporting each other to recognize it in each other, because certainly as Brits, we're not always the greatest at saying what we're good at. We're much better at saying what we find hard. But I have to say, in all of the work that I've been doing, that's one thing I have been looking at, being confident enough to say, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm going to bring to this team here. And I'm really excited about bringing that and working with you.
I would love to hear a little bit more, about how do you navigate the challenges that come when not everyone is on a boat, with you in regards to this is the expectation. This is what we are hoping for in regards to teaming, developing our own craft. This is how we nurture the culture in our own school communities, or given the host of communities that you may serve. How are you navigating that when some people aren't on board?
It's funny actually that you say that, because that was one of the things that I looked at. It was looking at not only how do we form good relationships from the beginning, but also how do we rebuild relationships that might have had, like you say, a bit of a bump in the road, where perhaps not everybody is on board. And one of the things that you can do is certainly try and identify what is the thing that is not working here. What is the issue? Is it that actually we haven't got the skills and the knowledge here, and we all need to research a bit more? Is it that actually it's a bit of a clash of personalities? But I think in terms of finding out what it is, identifying what the issue is, that can really be a great way to sort of say, right, well, if we've got the same goal, being really clear on what it is we're working towards, that's our focus. If it's the children, okay, they're bigger than us. We're going to make this work. They're our priority. We don't have to be best friends at the end of all of this, but what we do need to do is come to an agreement that is going to work for the children. And then what we can do is, right, so what's not working here? Is it that we don't have the time? Is it that we don't have the knowledge? Is it that we don't have the support? And if we can try and pinpoint the thing that's not working, I think that can at least, even if it doesn't make, as I said, that best friend relationship, it can hopefully still build that professional relationship where you get to be successful in meeting the goal. So I think, it is about being a grown-up, I think, and saying, this is difficult. I realize that we're having very different opinions here, but what's our focus? What is our goal? And I think that was one of the things that I kept sort of mentioning in my work with the presentation before, was that it was, it's having that shared goal, that common interest of why are we doing this? And it's always coming back to that, always bringing back to that point, which can be hard when emotions are involved. But, it's about, if it's for the children, it's focusing on them.
That part I think is so critical, because in education, I would like to believe, are all there for the same goal. How we're coming to that might look a little different. And years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a school board who was not getting along. And we did a lot of team building work with them. Who are you? What do you bring to the table? What are your strengths? We even had them do the Keirsey personality inventory: introvert, extrovert, planner. I don't like the word that they use. It's I think judging or perceiving, but it means, in essence, are you a planner or are you more spur of the moment? And opening up that dialogue allowed people to say, you know what, I didn't realize that was your perspective, or that was the way that you operate best. Particularly when you're looking at positions of somebody who's overseeing finances for the organization versus somebody who is working with the kids. And they're like, we're all here for the same goal, but the way that we're approaching it is different. And we don't all need to be the closest, bestest friends. But because that's not reality for relationships, there are ebbs and flows to that. And I think acknowledging that, but talking about how we can communicate to realign ourselves is really significant. And I suspect that there's not enough, as you said, intentional conversation and space to do that.
I think people are sometimes afraid to have that conversation. It can feel a bit raw. It can feel a little bit like, I'm failing if this team isn't working. And if I'm the one bringing it up, then, am I holding my hand up and saying it's my fault? Whereas actually, I think it shows strength. It shows that ability to be reflective, to say, this, as I said, it's bigger than me. It's not just about what I'm bringing. I was just trying to think there about, so Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, and performing.
Yes.
So, I mean, with any of those relationships, there is going to be those moments where it does feel a bit stormy. People are feeling a little bit intimidated, maybe feeling, well, what am I going to bring to this party here then? And I think, it's normal to have that. And I think maybe it's about not being scared of finding that place where we start feeling a little bit more comfortable. And, it probably is going to take more than one meeting. It probably is going to take a little bit of time. I mean, obviously, if, 6 weeks later, things are not great, that's maybe when you need to sit down and have that other conversation I'd mentioned before. But I think, there does need to have that opportunity. Same with a group of children. We start the school year, we talk to them about our norms, we talk to them about how do we want to have a safe and happy and caring environment where we're all excited to learn together. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes them sort of respecting each other and recognizing that everyone's got a point of view, and how do we listen to that? And, I think as adults, we could learn a lot from the children, and also what we ask the children to do. We could probably do it ourselves a little bit better sometimes.
So I'm keeping an eye on our time and knowing that we need to wrap up shortly, but I'm going to ask you, and Craig, I'm going to ask you to jump in on this too. What do you have confidence in? What are those pieces that you are sure of and that are your strengths and that you bring to a group?
So I would say that I would be the supportive person. I think when I see people in my team feeling overwhelmed or they've got too much on their plate, I would say that I'm there supporting them, saying, can I help you? Can I take some of this away and help you out there? But not just with the work, but emotionally as well, just being that support where, if you're having a bad day, you get that off your chest. There's no judgment here. We all have bad days. We're all human. And I think, that whole myth of with well-being, it's all about being happy all the time. Well, it's not. It's about recognizing that we all have different emotions and having a way to express those emotions. So I would say I'm that supportive person, but I would also say I'm very, driven in terms of how do we solve these problems? How are we going to get to the solution? So I'd say in terms of eye on the goal, making sure we get there, coming up with different ideas, but then the supportive person, I would say that they would be my two.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, there's another model of relationship building that I use, but it's very similar to the one that you mentioned. And we need to know our strengths. Once we get to know each other and we know what our goals are, we need to be very clear on what strengths we can bring to the table so we can all work together to reach those goals. Yeah. So now I know that about you, Gemma. You'll be hearing from me more.
I look forward to that. That'd be good.
You just had to say that because we're on the podcast. Would you be like, no, thank you?
No, I've been completely fangirling. Don't you worry. I've been fangirling for weeks now. So,
so Craig.
What is it that I could add to this, which very succinctly, I think, and I've said this many times, and it's about doing the work. Like, you have to do your own personal inventory, your own personal work to understand how you can add value and be an asset. And you constantly have to interrogate your own beliefs, understandings, and get rooted to a particular constitution of, I am doing this because I understand that this is going to support the young person or young people. We are called to serve. And we want to be able to partner and collaborate with all kinds of people from all walks of life in a way that, again, is student-centered. And we want them to get the best that they can. So it means we have to do work as adults to do that. And so I continue to do a lot of work. There's a lot of excavation in my humanity, but, I think that is part of it. I do know, before we close, I have this question, Gemma, that we posed on SEL Day that I would love to know from you, if that's okay, Krista.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
What do you believe is your SEL, your social emotional learning and well-being superpower?
Ooh, oh, that's a tough one. Um,
It brings them.
I would say I'm not. Do you know? Whoa. I think emotionally aware. I think I'm very emotionally aware of other people, and in fact, my colleague said it to me the other day. She said, there's something. As soon as you look over, you can see it without even having an expression on my face. You can read how I'm feeling, and I think that's something which is great because I do care for my friends, my colleagues. I want to take care of people and support them, but at the same time it can also be something that I dwell on a lot because I sort of think about even when the time's gone, think, are they okay? How can I help them? And sometimes it's not my responsibility to help them. But yeah, so I'd say that's a superpower, but could also be my kryptonite.
Ooh.
We started off this talking about how important small talk was. And I'm one of those like small talk, the weather, what like give me the big juicy, like let's dive into it. And so coming full round in just a short amount of time to knowing what your superpower and kryptonite are all in one um, is definitely away from small talk, but really gives power to getting to know people and to that idea of connecting and what steps we can take within ourselves to help cultivate a really strong team and a connected community.
Yeah. And I think that's why we need to have it. It's why we need our colleagues. It's why we need our children. It's why we need people to be aware of not only how they're feeling, but how to respond to their feelings. Because actually, someone else can't do everything for us. And, we can support people, but there is a sense of actually, there are times where you have to be able to be okay, to look after yourself. And and as I said, it doesn't mean you have to sit there being happy all the time, but it's knowing that, okay, where's my toolkit, what am I going to get out? I'm feeling really a bit fed up, so okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what. And that's why I think it's so important that we support people to develop those skills and that understanding about themselves and emotions, and and develop that emotional intelligence.
That just again fills my heart and my bucket. It starts with us, and we need to be able to model that, and you opening up that space for adults so that they can then turn around and do the same thing for their young people that they are overseeing. And Craig, what did you say? Young people with big brains, big hearts, you said something on one of our episodes that
Yes, they have all of that. Big personalities, but they have big brains that are continuing to grow, big hearts that are opening up to people in a way that is profound because they want people to love them and all of what they bring to the table. And they got big work ahead of them. So, we want them to take over the world, step in the gap, collaborate, build community, lead, advocate. We want them to be charitable and generous, but we also want them to take space and also give space. So there's so many things that we're preparing our young people for that. Yeah, it's a big job to be a human.
that's
Sure is.
But we were able to talk today about some really actionable ways to start off and start refining that process. So, Gemma, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise. This has been fabulous.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so people want to have a virtual cup of tea with you. How do they connect with you?
Gemma FCAS is my Twitter handle. Would love to hear from people. yeah, that's probably going to be the best way to get in touch with me. And I would love to have these chats. I was saying to Chris right at the beginning, it's that fire in my belly having these conversations with people who are passionate about well-being and supporting both children and adults. That's really important to me.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yes. So I know I'm supposed to close out as I always do. We are so incredibly in gratitude by Gemma today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are going to wish you and others nothing but light and love. And we just hope that you continue to stand in the light. So